This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains CitizeNetReporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benneroff, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. White Plains Week, what's happening, who are the newsmakers, what's in store for the future. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Happy New Year, Mr. and Mrs. and Ms. White Plains, Westchester, and the world at large. Welcome to the traditional Stories of the Year show of White Plains Week. Rounding up a year like no other, the notorious 2020. And fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be 30 minutes of bad road with a happy recap, so hold on to your champagne. You're looking at the start of 2020. The ball drop on New Year's Eve in downtown White Plains, New York, USA. The new 2020 started with excitement. The city revenues were flowing then. The top stories of the year began to hit. Number one was the coronavirus that gripped White Plains and the world. Number two, White Plains signed a $25 million agreement to install solar panels on the tops of 8 White Plains properties. 3, White Plains suffers worst economy in 23 years. 4, modern Mondaire Jones replaces Nita Lowey in Congress. Chris Burdick replaces David Buchwald as Assemblyman, and we will miss David. He was a hard-working legislator and deserved a better fate. Apartment developments start construction. 55 Bank Street completes. Good Counsel Apartments move ahead. FASNY is stymied once again. Real estate comes back. Home prices go up on all levels, but it's getting harder and harder to get a starter house because more down payment is needed. Playland dispute is settled by the county with Standard Amusements, and Standard takes over. Mayor Roach steadies the city with optimism and people's trust. Now, in January, the Board of Education launched a $226 million budget with a 3.5% tax increase and $11 million in new state aid, as the state contemplated a huge increase in spending. But in January, we had harbingers of economic slowdown. Doral Arrowwood, the luxury resort there for decades, over just on the edge of White Plains, closed, and later in the year, the Crown Plaza Hotel was acquired by Sonesta, which is giving it a makeover. The Public Service Commission granted Con Ed a 14.5% increase in natural gas prices and 8.6% in electric delivery charges. Later in the year, the PSC approved it with absolutely no question. We saw a new site plan for 52 North Broadway, the old Good Counsel property. The new site plan scales down the project to 28 townhouses, 335 assisted living units, and to a total of 610 residents, down from 410 from 1,085. The property was also deemed safe by the DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation. And in the same month, Mayor Tom Roach announced a landmark solar project for city-owned buildings on top of 8 city buildings, which you can see listed there, and they're all familiar properties to you, and the solar panels will go on the roof. It is Mayor Roach's most ambitious green energy decision to date. It will install solar panels on 8 city-owned buildings, and the city will be paid $960,000 every year for 26 years. That is a deal. That's, count it up, that's $26 million. February saw Westchester County blithely unaware of the unprecedented epidemic to come, about to hit. That time, sales taxes were rebound. February hit the usual $4 million in sales tax receipts, but the month ahead had warnings. The warnings came in the need to grant a 3-year site plan extension to the Hamilton Green project, upper right, targeted for some years now for the old White Plains Mall, which is still occupied, and there is no moving of the DMV anytime soon. At the end of the month, the Appellate Court of Appeals dismissed the city and the city and the French-American School lawsuit that the court dismissed the FASD appeal. And the Appellate Court in Brooklyn, agreed to hear Dan Seidel's appeal. Mr. Seidel took the appeal for the Gindy Association pro bono, and he got the court to hear his argument, and that final argument is scheduled, we do not know when, because courts are somewhat at a standstill due to the present state of coronavirus. Now, the shot of the Rochester Broadway Theater's last production, Five Guys Named Mo, shows something that was really sad that we learned about in February. It turned out that Five Guys Named Mo was to be the last show of the Westchester Broadway Theater. The theater announced later in August that after being dark for 5 months, and because the landlord would not extend their lease, that they were closing forever. The theater of so much joy and entertainment for people of all ages will be turned into a warehouse. Bill Sutler and Bob Funking, the owners, provided unique, live, up-close, and personal theater of Broadway's greatest hits for over 40 years. They employed, over the years, over 5,000 people. They gave a lot of people who are now stars on Broadway their starts. And this was a wake-up call that things were not going well. The Ides of March brought a COVID chill over the county so quickly. As coronavirus spread in Washington State, then came to New York via flights from Europe, cases spread that by the end of the month, Governor Cuomo, starting daily briefings, shut down schools, ordered people to wear masks, and socially distance. Mayor Roach announced 172 White Plains cases, and the White Plains schools hurried and devised a remote learning program in 4 days. An amazing cooperative achievement by teachers, administrators, the superintendent of schools, parents. It was an extraordinary turnaround of going from no remoting to all remote to keep education going. It's one of the great bureaucratic achievements I've ever witnessed, and in fact, it wasn't bureaucratic, it was professional. Now, April saw the governor's restrictions slow the spread dramatically, and it really is amazing. It seemed, I think anyway, that going through the daily briefings of where we were on stopping the curve, whether it was flattening or what, it seemed interminable, but it was only a month before the slowing of the curve took place. He closed beaches, parks, restaurants, and targeted outbreak areas. That's a picture of the application you had to return for the absentee ballot. The governor said that absentee ballots would be made available to voters for the June Democratic primary, and that is what you had to do. You had to mail it in, and I got mine back pretty quickly. The governor also brought in Mike Bloomberg, shown below, to design a tracing program that has been amazing in the way it has stopped the spread and targeted areas that are cluster breakouts. And then they limit it, and within about a week they control it thanks to tracing. Now, it's very important that you were told you have been exposed to COVID and a tracer calls you, that you accept their call. It will help, and they only want to make sure that you do not give it to others, and others do not carry it to others. I mean, that's the whole point of tracing. It's not a privacy thing. Okay, now you're looking at a wear a face mask spot that was created. Over 600 spots were submitted in this contest, which was supervised by one of Governor Cuomo's daughters, and 5 were selected to be finalists. The spots were watched on the governor's daily briefings and were instrumental, in my opinion, in controlling the spread that the governor announced. Daily cleanings of subways and plans for a new 2nd Avenue subway and a new Penn Station. The article on the right notes that in a month, the employment rate in Westchester County fell 14%. That is in May. And at the end of the year, end of December, it is still 14% down. Employment down 14%. The worst at this time of the year since 2010. So we have to try and get back to work in the best way possible, and it's up to us to behave responsibly. In June, Westchester experienced a free-for-all primary. The shock of the primary was not only results, but the long lines of people at the polls and the thousands of absentee ballots that were not counted until the end of July. The big winners were Mondaire Jones for the Nita Lowey 17th congressional seat. He then won later in November. And Mimi Rocca, who ousted Anthony Scarpino, the district attorney, from the DA position on the ballot, and went on to win in November. Chris Burdick, in a close race, won the right to contend for David Buchwald's seat in the fall, and that's what he did, and he won. He went on to win in November. That was Mr. Burdick, and Shelley Mayer was chosen to run for the George Latimer's former state senate district. Everybody agreed the voting places had to be better staffed and more of that. Did they make changes for November when more absentee ballots and early voters were expected, and that they expected the polls would be swamped? What do you think? If you voted in person in November, you know the answer. No, they did not. It was another inconvenient thing. not inconvenient, cruel. I mean, senior citizens standing out for hours to vote. Jim Benneroff took him 4.5 hours to vote in White Plains. Part of the problem of this was the total lack of adequate number of polls. July turned hot. The weather was unusually blazing. The sun felt hotter than ever, the kind when Dan Ingram on WABC Music Radio, reverently pictured there, would tell persons enjoying the beach to roll your bod. And that's how hot it was in the summer of 2020, and it was just too tough to be outside. It was that hot. The governor, trying to preserve the success of stopping the spread and flattening the curve, called on schools for a reopening plan, and the White Plains Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Joseph Ricca, devised a hybrid plan, 2 days in class, 1 day remote, then switch. So far, it has worked with White Plains schools. Since September 21st, when schools opened, there's only been an infection rate of positive COVID persons that is 1.4% of the 8,500 students. Teachers and staff of the district, that's an amazing record. 1.4% of a population of 8,500 students, teachers, and staff. This is how hard they worked and how responsible parents, students, teachers, staff have been day in, day out since September 21st. Now, sales tax in June was down 18%, but the city did make its 2019-20 budget number of $50 million. We also learned that the multi-system inflammatory syndrome growth, a COVID offshoot that had been rising in the earlier spring, had slowed, and we haven't heard much about that lately. The dog days of August were fraught with questions. A group raised the issue of the safety of 5G cell towers being installed in the city and pointed out in this Zoom meeting the effects of microwave intensity on children and adults. Mayor Roach listened and promised legislation to regulate the spread of towers in the city. He also authorized the purchase of microwave intensity measuring equipment for the DPW. The 5G group has been promised the discussion of the regulations when the city formulates them, still in process. Personalities made news. County Executive George Latimer said Con Ed's response to the tail end of the Isaiah, I can't pronounce that, hurricane, that was unprepared. And he said he accused Con Ed of not being ready, and he demanded better response next time. Power was out for some persons in the county for 10 days, particularly Bedford. Bedford hard hit. Emerly Martinez, shown at the bottom of your screen, was selected to be the new principal of White Plains High School. What a year to break in. Perhaps the worst crisis any principal, other than something regarding violence, could face, and on a daily basis. So we hope to be interviewing him soon and get to know him and get his perspective on the White Plains schools. And Governor Cuomo, the #1 personality in my book, relentlessly pleaded with New York State representatives and senators for $30 billion to replace lost revenue from COVID and billions more for other states like New York, like the states in the Midwest, California, who have simply had their revenue sources choked off due to the COVID spread and the economy shutdowns. He has lobbied intensely in vain. Admittedly, in the last few days, Congress has come to its senses, passed the a new COVID relief bill, increasing unemployment benefits, but not by much. And they did not pass a aid to the states and individual states package that would be dedicated to eradicating the shortfalls. And they say that that's going to happen later. And the pressure is on. The pressure is on. It's really needed, otherwise the economy is most likely going to stay exactly the way it is. Now, I will also say that this was a mantra of Governor Cuomo, that the states need the aid. He demonstrated the need, and it's absolutely, again, I have to say, essential. School came back late in September, and you are watching a year of 2020 Top Stories of the Year program on a special edition of White Plains Week. School, as I said, came back in late September after much speculation. White Plains debuted its hybrid learning program September the 21st, and the second day there was a COVID infection. Amazing, wouldn't you think? The superintendent immediately announced the school was closed, it was the middle school, for 2 days, and then the district proceeded. A lackluster campaign ensued on the elections, with the candidate for district attorney not responding, so the League of Women Voters canceled the forum. This is not good. If you run, you need to voice opposition and have respect for the voter. You just can't balk because you think you're going to lose. You should never run for it in the first place. Now, Mr. and Mrs. and Ms. White Plains were being worried about COVID and in anxiety over the hour-by-hour fusillades of the national election banter, and I use that word lightly, and then the second wave began. In October, COVID cases, 1 month after Labor Day, Westchester cases had crept back up to 100 cases a day. This was going into November, the beginning of travel and the holidays. This was on top of a national outbreak nationwide. The news was bad, the death tolls were horrific and still continue to be nationally. And it was just not a good thing. But in November, in the most exciting election I have ever experienced, Joe Biden came from behind by midnight, and 3 days later, over much counting of absentee ballots, was declared the president-elect. But looming over the end of the campaign that did not end was COVID. In 1 month, on December the 1st, the COVID rate in Westchester had exploded from 100 new cases a day at the beginning of November to an average 450 a day on December the 1st. The trend continued in December, rising to 556 average new infections a day by December 28th. The infection rate as of Monday was 5.7% in Westchester and hit 6% for most of this month, December. The hospitalization rate, according to County Executive George Latimer, was between 4 and 5%, and with 556 new infections a day and a 5% infection rate among them, that means in maybe 10 days they are going to produce new infections at 27. It is imperative more enforcement be done. Air travel from the UK by Delta, British Airways, and Virgin Atlantic is requiring passengers bound for New York to test COVID negative before boarding their planes. In other news in December, a decision was announced on Playland. The county settled with Standard Amusements, and the county will run Playland in 2021, with Standard taking over the management in 2022. Standard pays the county more money as a management fee, but the county is spending $160 million to fix the park. Quite a departure from the first deal. Real estate sales are up on expensive homes, and prices are up. And realtors want you to put your home on the market. However, the cost of buying starter homes is going up. And at the end of this very hard year for everyone, I have to congratulate Governor Cuomo, America's governor, for his pioneering of information distribution, his tracing program, his fearless initiative to improve citizen compliance, and of course, his daily briefing that informs, inspires, and always leaves you with hope and a can-do attitude. I salute Mayor Tom Roach of White Plains for his making green energy savings and his embrace of solar a tremendous step forward, a pace setter for the county, and his always terse, timely use of phone calls to keep us informed on COVID every week on a regular basis. It is a privilege to live in such a well-run city, which has some hard decisions to make as we move into the next page, 2021. This is John Bailey saying Happy New Year, Jim Benaroff and Peter Katz, White Plains Television's Keith Baker, Rita Santos, and its executive director, Jim Kenny, and, of course, our special guest, ladies and gentlemen, Bing Crosby.
1 minute to midnight, 1 minute to go, 1 minute to say goodbye before we say hello. Let's start the new year right, 12 o'clock tonight. When they dim the light, let's begin kissing the old year out, kissing the new year in. Let's watch the old year die with a fond goodbye, and our hopes are high as a kite. How can our love go wrong if we start the new year right?
Let's start the new year right, 12 o'clock tonight. When they dim the light, let's begin kissing the old year out, kissing the new year in.
Let's watch the old year die with a fond goodbye, and our hopes are high as a kite. How can our love go wrong if we start the new year right?
Out the old year, let's start the new year right.
This has been White Plains Week, news and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains CitizenNetReporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.